Hi, in this upcoming video, we're going to discuss a few things. Number one, what love bombing actually is. And number two, the psychological mechanisms behind trauma bonding and its profound impact on victims and all individuals. And number three, to recognize the early warning signs of love bombing and distinguish between genuine affection and manipulation. And number four, strategies for breaking free from the love bombing trap and reclaiming autonomy in your relationships. You'll also hear questions from our live workshop attendees, and answers, which may help you understand even more. Okay, let's dive in. Love bombing, what is it? According to Psychology Today, love bombing is an attempt to influence another person with over-the-top displays of attention and affection. And while it might sound nice to be lavished with attention and affection, this is actually a red flag, particularly when it happens early on in a relationship. Love bombing is a form of psychological and emotional abuse disguised in bombing a person with flattery, excessive compliments, mirroring, future faking, which I'll explain those in a minute. Lots of affection, paying close attention to you, and sometimes even grand gestures in order to manipulate them into a relationship or to lure them into staying. And while love bombing is mostly known to be displayed in grand gestures, it can be subtle as well. And I'll note the more subtle forms of love bombing along the way. We often see love bombing portrayed in movies and on TV, where a man meets a woman and professes his love and infatuation with her. A very passionate romance sparks, and the man sweeps the woman off her feet. And before you know it, they are completely committed to one another and not able to live without each other, basically right after they've just met or soon thereafter. And there are a lot of powerful emotions and expressions and promises made early on in the relationship where love bombing is taking place. And it seems really romantic, right? But love bombing can be motivated by a desire to have control and establish it early on. It can also be motivated by insecurity or a lack of trusting others, and unconsciously be used as a method to woo the other person, to paint a false picture based out of that insecurity. It is a manipulation, and yet it isn't always intentional. For example, a person who has low self-esteem may use love bombing as a way to gain value and validation from others. Having low self-esteem makes someone more prone to use the tactic, whereas someone who is secure within themselves, who loves themselves, is self-reflective and confident, will not need that outside validation or affirmation of value. So they're less likely to love bomb. Love bombing is a red flag and an indicator that a trauma bond may be established, because love bombing is the first stage of a trauma bond forming. If you've been with us for a while, you may recall a workshop that we did on trauma bonding. And if you've not yet seen or listened to that workshop, I highly recommend that you do. You can find it on our website and our YouTube channel. Love bombing actually distracts and covers for abusive behavior. The love bomber hopes that with their over-the-top attention, flattery, or gifts, that the aggression and abusive behavior they eventually display will be forgiven and even forgotten, because that love bombing stage is the imprint that the victim has mostly in their mind. Love bombing can be experienced at any point in the relationship. I mean, sometimes after a breakup, there's love bombing. And we call that hoovering, which I'll get into. But so it's often seen early on as people are in the beginning stages of getting to know one another. Also, while it typically happens between people in a dating relationship, it can happen outside of dating relationships too. For example, A friend that you meet love bombs you, or a family member. I'm wondering if any of you are willing to post in the chat a way that you were love bombed in the past, just to get the conversation going. Try to think of ways that you, looking back, maybe you didn't recognize it while it was happening, but looking back, you can see how the person was intentionally enticing you to believe better of them. So any examples of love bombing that you can give us would be great.
Okay, one person is saying bought me things, and I'm sorry for my voice as well. I also am fighting a cold. So the chat is filling up. It says bought me things. And then another one says, my sons that are using drugs. And Annette, you'll get into this if you haven't mentioned it already. That love bombing, it can also happen outside of intimate partner relationships. So
Yes.
note that. Okay, so let me read the rest. I didn't know. Sorry, the chat's going, which is awesome. I didn't know this was love bombing. He put me on a pedestal. And then
Yeah.
it says flowers, lunch daily, and got close to my kids.
Mm.
Another one says they always wanted to be around me, gifting me, and turning around and subliminally adding in bad things about people around me.
Oh, very interesting.
Another one says, flowers, I love you. You're the most important person in my life. I want our roots to grow deeper, dot, dot, dot. Lots of words were used.
Yeah.
Um, it was both a love bomb and another sort of manipulation. I was so wonderful, not like all the horrible people who mistreated her in the past. This also meant she could invoke those people whenever I'd behave in a way she didn't like.
Oh,
Um, my ex fiance discarded me, then showed up parked outside of my house, telling me how she can't live without me. And I'm the best thing that ever happened. And I'm the best thing that ever happened. And she'll do anything, blah, blah, blah.
mhm.
Constant texting, FaceTiming a lot at first, sending photos of self very early on.
Yeah.
Unexpected amounts of attention for things that were relatively non noteworthy. We
Very
are
good.
so much alike. We were meant to be together. A constant communication, seemed attentive, but now realized it was insecurity. And then a couple more. When I set a boundary, they get upset because they want to show me their love. And then
Mm.
I'll read this last one. He told me he wasn't looking for another quote friend, manipulated me into starting a relationship after we'd built an emotional connection, and he put me on a pedestal. So a lot
Yeah.
here. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for participating in the chat. Because that lets everybody kind of feel what each other's experiences are, and just to give us an idea of how many faces love bombing can take. In a moment, I'm going to go through several signs that indicate love bombing is taking place. And I do want to make sure to note that if you are many months or even years into a relationship and you're experiencing these things I'm about to mention, it may be an indication that you're in an abuse cycle past the initial love bombing stage. And it may be like you may be specifically in the honeymoon phase or in a hoovering stage. And hoovering is when someone tries to get you back into the relationship after you've set a boundary and instilled consequences, and maybe you've requested distance. And some of what I mentioned may be triggering. And if you feel at any point dysregulated, please feel free to mute or exit the webinar until you feel comfortable. It's so important to take good care of yourselves. And like Jill said earlier, the recording will be sent to you. And so you don't have to worry about that. So what are the signs that love bombing is taking place early in a relationship? How does it look? We know that learning about someone and getting to know a person, it takes time, right? It's said that you need to go through every season of the year together, celebrate holidays, watch how each other responds to hard things in life, and see how each other's navigates through conflicts, especially. Um, Having multiple arguments actually helps to really know the methods that your partner uses when they fight. In a relationship where love bombing is happening, rather than taking time to get to know someone and waiting to communicate strong feelings, there is over communication. And this can look like an excessive amount of communication or an over communication of strong feelings, using labels and statements such as, "You're perfect for me," or "You are my person," or "You are my soulmate." We're so compatible, etc. The one who is love bombing may also talk about marriage early on in the relationship. When someone tells another person, "I love you," and they've only been dating for a week or two, that can really be a warning sign. All of these can be a warning sign, especially when they happen early on. Somebody who is secure and is healthy, emotionally and healthy and mature, is going to take their time. They're not insecure. They don't need to attach right away. They're going to be sizing you up and being cautious and seeing if you're really a good fit for them. So this leads me to a form of love bombing called future faking. Future faking is a manipulation where the love bomber speaks of the future together and promises the partner that they'll fulfill, all or many of their desires, the big vacation, the big home, the big wedding, the big family, or it could be smaller things, but they understand what you like, and then they promise that they're going to behave a certain way in the future. Or it may be, subtle things like, "I will love your children like my own." Or they'll talk about how cute your kids together will be one day. They may even say something like, "I earn more than enough for you to quit your job so you can be home with your child." Or, "I support you going back to school or going back to work," and so on. Whatever the issue is, it's unique in every relationship, but they make a commitment about the future. And then when the future, I'll get to that. The victim of love bombing where future faking is taking place will say things like, "It feels too good to be true." Or the love bomber speaks lavishly of their love and commitment, but it's all an illusion and a distortion of reality that they're actually manipulatively creating. And when the time comes to actually carry out and fulfill those things, or has to actually fulfill those things, the love bomber will have excuses why they can't or won't meet their promises. Or maybe they'll gaslight you by saying, "I never said that." So future faking is all about false promises, and it causes a lot of pain and confusion in the relationship. Another way you might want to say it is bait and switch. They bait you into believing it's going to look a certain way. And then when it gets to that stage, they switch their tactics and they don't deliver on their promises. Another sign, of love bombing is that's taking place in a relationship is big compliments. Compliments are normal in dating. They're often used to express something that's liked or appreciated about a person. They also show that they're interested in you. But in love bombing, the compliments are excessive, or they're big flattery statements such as like, "I would be nothing if I didn't have you," or "You make me a better person. There's no one more perfect for me than you. You're the answer to my prayers. You complete me," and so on. Compliments like this are red flags that love bombing is taking place, because it's not typical that people who met a short time ago would make these blanketed statements like that. It's way too soon. No matter how wonderful you are, it's too soon. It's not a sign that this is a healthy person. Another sign of love bombing is something called mirroring. Mirroring is one of the more subtle forms of love bombing. Just as it sounds, it's an intentional mirroring of another's behaviors, speech, gestures, body language, and even includes mirroring another's dislikes or likes or values, all for the sake of trying to get the other feel connected to them. Now, it's one thing if you actually do share the same values and you're talking about those things, But in mirroring, the love bomber simply copies what they know you would value, and they act like it's their passionate interest too. Like maybe it's, I love playing doubles tennis. And so they play tennis with you, but then once you're in the relationship, they don't want to play doubles tennis with you anymore. They only want to play singles with their friends. Things like that is mirroring, and it's also future faking. They may even pretend to have the same values that you have, like honesty, integrity, and perseverance. And then a few months down the road, the victim experiences breaks in those same values. They see that they aren't as integrous as they projected or as they proclaim themselves to be. Being given unwanted, unneeded gifts or big, expensive gifts is also a sign that you're being love bombed. Similar to the others, giving gifts is a nice way to show a dating partner that you're thinking of them and that you care, and it can be a gesture of affection. But gifts can also deepen a special connection. On the other hand, gifts can also be used as a manipulative tool or a way to overlord another person. For example, if two people meet at a bar and the guy's buy the girl a drink, he may say, "I bought you a drink. You at least owe me a kiss on the cheek." Something that makes you feel obligated. Or maybe the love bomber gives a large gift like flights for the two of you to a romantic destination. With big gift giving, there's an expectation of something in return at any time. And if you're uncomfortable with the grand gesture and the gift, pay attention to that discomfort in you. Like, listen to your body. It's a sign that it very well could be love bombing. So you're going to, unless you are I'm going to be totally frank. If you're naive or you are too desperate for a relationship, you might take those signs and just be happy to have the attention. And that's really work that you need to do on yourself to be able to get to a place where you can actually feel comfortable saying, no, this isn't right for me. But if you are really ready for a relationship, your body is going to be more in tune with your values, and it's going to speak to you. And I want you to really listen to that and recognize what you're feeling, because so often we gaslight ourselves and we say, oh no, it's fine. It's fine. He's just super nice. I'm just not used to being treated nicely, or she's super nice, whichever case it is. And I want you to really pay attention because we often do gaslight ourselves, especially if you're an empathic person. That's something that commonly happens. And the other person may be gaslighting you as well. So you really need to listen to the way your body speaks to you. There's a dozen more signs, and I will more briefly mention some of them. The one who is love bombing will share the deepest things about them very early on. For example, within a few dates, which is too soon. Or if a date shares a lot of information, the abuser may use it as an open door to love bomb. Basically, they want to know all about you early on. They come across so interested, they're almost mesmerized by you and your life, listening intently to every detail, which can feel really good. And when the love bomber shares so much so openly themselves, it can even lead to someone to think, wow, this person is so real and transparent. But it's false intimacy, because intimacy that is true and really grounded with a safe attachment takes time. You build trust over time by watching each other and how you handle situations. It's a gradual experience. It's not an instantaneous one. If you divulge too much to a love bomber early in the relationship about yourself, those disclosures will often be used against you later on to manipulate you, to control you, or to destroy your reputation. The love bomber will also say all the right things. They are charming and have exceptional social skills. They can read you well and know just what you want to hear. Remember, because they're mirroring you, so they're reading you to say the right things to you. They're sure to remind you the relationship is meant to be and that you are for them and you are so good together. This kind of talk keeps you around. It's also used as a tactic. For example, after an argument. So let's say they don't handle themselves very well in a conflict. They will then go back to trying to regain your attention and your commitment by hoovering. It's a way to suck you back in to the relationship, like the Hoover vacuum cleaner. So they'll love bomb you at that stage. Or if you're fully in the relationship, we would call that the honeymoon phase after the cycle of abuse cycles through. Another thing is they don't take responsibility or share their part in the ending of previous relationships. You'll hear about how crazy their ex was, or all the bad things that other people did to them, and how you're perfect for them. They may offer a rather benign, like not something that doesn't really make them look guilty, admission of fault, to cause you to believe that they're willing to admit guilt and that they're willing to be transparent. But what they're telling you is only the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to the story that they're not disclosing. The love bomber may be clingy and needy of you, your time, your attention. Or after showing you deep affection, they may ghost you for a couple of days, leaving you to wonder what you did wrong. So it can be this cat and mouse game playing. Another thing they may do is to be readily available to you and demanding your attention to them, and even displaying jealousy when you're with someone else, even a friend or a family member, which is a huge red flag. It's not normal jealousy. We can all experience, jealousy from time to time, but jealousy that they exude is an intense jealousy or constant jealousy that is ultimately used to keep you with them and close to them. And it can lead you to forgo what you want to do and give up your autonomy and independence, and even give up your friendships and time that you normally like to spend with your family. Along that same line, they may also lay on pressure to commit to them early on. It may look like pressure to get married or pressure to be exclusive, when it's really not an appropriate time, like you're still just dating to get to know the person. You're not ready to make a total commitment. Love bombers also ignore your boundaries. They do so because they don't genuinely care about you and what's good for you. Their goal is to get what they want, and they will do just about anything at any cost, including disrespecting you and dismissing your needs and wants. So if you tell them no, they likely won't be able to handle it as a full sentence. In other words, saying no should be enough. But they're going to want more. They're going to try to pry more out of you and try to persuade you to change your stance, your boundary. They also may react in anger at your boundary or at your request for them to respect your boundary. It's not uncommon for them to be highly emotional and controlling, and so they're going to be angry about that. Or when you question something about them or their life or behavior, they may lash out at you because they can't tolerate any criticism. They don't have the ability to be self-reflective. So they have an outer critic, but they don't have an inner critic willing to self-examine, if that makes sense. The love bomber may follow and know your whereabouts to stay constantly connected to you, your every move and, your comings and goings. And this is a major red flag. It's not appropriate in a dating relationship to have your locations set where you can follow each other. And it's just too soon for that sort of thing. And they're going to want to do that early on. And this leads me to another warning sign. And that is if you feel that you have to often reassure a person who is a love bomber, if this person needs continual reassurance, or if you feel you need to regularly validate and affirm them, this is a sure sign that you're dealing with a love bomber. narcissists need supply. They need validation. They don't function without supply. They don't function well. That's when you're going to see the ugly come out. So keep that in mind. So I'm just wondering, do any of these signs that I've mentioned resonate with you? If you don't mind, please let us know in the chat. Let us know your comments. You can ask a question, you can make a comment, and let me know if any of these examples have been something you've experienced.
It's kind of amazing, Annette, because everything you shared, a number of the shares from before you went into all that actually were the very things that you just spoke about. So I love that it was, it just took a deeper dive and was a little more thorough to what we had already heard. But we do have some more in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and go through it. And I see some coming in now. Somebody who, as you were speaking, noted that they're just coming to realize how much mirroring was used to manipulate them in their relationship, in their last relationship. And then we had a parent say that this sounds like my daughter's boyfriend. My daughter was diagnosed bipolar and is currently needing her meds adjusted with some sad faces. And Annette, I thought maybe you could speak to how this parent might be able to help inform without over confront her daughter so that maybe her daughter can see or begin to realize maybe this isn't a healthy relationship forming.
I'm sorry to hear that. Number one, that sounds really hard. What we say at the Men Project is don't over confront a victim, but don't under inform them either. So you don't want to rush out and say you're being love bombed, or he's mirroring you, he's hoovering you, he's future faking. You don't want to say it initially, because the person will then be defensive and they'll protect that person. It's something they need to discover on their own by you providing them valuable information. And so I would go on our website and pull our terms and definitions, which is on our resource page, to show some of the characteristics that they'll use. You might want to have her listen to this workshop. You might just Google love bombing, and maybe you can find a nice article about it. We're going to have a blog post on it soon, but we don't have it up yet. And so you can provide her data is what I'm recommending, because when you might just say something like, honey, I noticed a couple of things the other day that were going on between you and your boyfriend. And it just kind of reminded me of this article. I don't know if it's true, but I just thought maybe you might benefit from reading it. Something subtle and caring like that, and not judgmental and not asserting too much. Well, this person is a love bomber. This person's abusive. You just want to be cautious and gentle about it. Okay, any other comments, Jill?
There are. So we have a number of people who said that they could really relate to all of them or most of them. Someone said many of the last ones that you had mentioned. We have a number of things here that are coming in, and I might, Annette, ask and check in with you. Is this a good time for you to maybe field some questions that have come in?
Sure.
Okay, awesome. So one says, I'm a bit worried I might have some of these unhealthy behaviors. Can these behaviors also show up in yourself, but without the intention to do this sort of thing?
Yeah. You're asking the question, I'm going to be totally frank. When you haven't really worked on issues such as codependency, it's common for somebody who's, I don't really like the term codependent. I like the term self-love deficit disorder better. It's when you have a lack of love for yourself. It's something that comes from your primary caregivers from attachment disruptions. where you just kind of have this underlying self-doubt that you message yourself with these doubting messages, where you think maybe I'm not lovable, maybe I need to work extra hard to be attractive. It can come from those motives as well, and it can be unconscious. And in those cases, it's really important to do the work. Usually it requires the work with a therapist to really dig deep into your childhood and things that may have caused you self-doubt, or that you don't trust your perspective, or you don't believe in yourself and really love yourself well. And so from that, I can easily see how you would demonstrate some of these love bombing techniques. And that's just really doing some deeper work on yourself. Because somebody who's really secure in themselves is going to dole out that kind of affection more cautiously. They're going to be completely fine taking it slow, and they don't feel any need to be in a rush or to put their best foot forward. They're going to take their time. I mean, yes, we all want to present ourselves well, but it won't be to that point of where you're over functioning, where you're doing more than what you should be. Okay, next question, Jill.
Thank you, Annette. Great question. That's very self-reflective, and
yeah, good for you.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. There's a few more. So I just don't understand when some of this might be okay. For example, my boyfriend of 4 months and I both have said to each other that we feel like we are meant for each other, soulmates, complete each other, feel whole, etc. We have known each other 5 years as friends, but just recently started a romantic relationship.
Well, if you've known each other for, I don't know how well you've known each other, but if you've known each other for 5 years, you've likely seen this person in a number of different scenarios, to see how they navigate life. So I don't know that I would categorize you finally coming to a dating relationship as love bombing. But the best thing for you to do is to trust your gut. Be cautious. Have you seen this person in conflict with other people before? Do you know how he navigates conflict? Have you talked to some of his close friends or ex-girlfriends to see how he's handled himself? Those are things I would want to know. And you're entitled to know those things since you've known him for 5 years. It shouldn't be unusual that you can connect with somebody else in his life and just ask how it went. But I'm not as cautious about someone that you've known for a long time and then you begin dating with as I would be if it was a stranger. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's another great question. I mean, all the questions are great here because
Yeah.
surely there's another person here who has a similar thinking or something along the same lines and is wondering. And Annette will talk a little bit. I know there was another comment or question here about how to determine when it's not love bombing. Like, how do you know if it's normal, healthy relationship? And I know you'll speak to that in a minute, Annette. But there is one more question that I want to get back to. Sorry, the chat keeps going, which is awesome. It says, what happens when you're in a long-term relationship and this has happened in the beginning of the relationship? No longer happening to that extent, but now there is a lot of disconnect and not a lot of attention given.
Well, that's exactly the point, is that love bombing, hooks you in. And so now there's disconnect, and you're wishing that the love bombing, that presentation that they created of themselves to you back then would be repeated, but it's not. That's the whole point of love bombing, is they want to hook you, but they don't want to live up to the expectations. And it's manipulative. It's dishonest because they're not following through. They're not being consistent. So that's something for you to look at. and to say, are my needs being met? Am I being loved the way I deserve to be loved? Am I being loved the way I'm loving this person? Are they just being lazy and dismissive of me? Nobody deserves that. And, it's hard to break off a relationship when you've been love bombed because you remember those good times from the past. But this is where you really need to step in and listen to your body, listen to your heart and your mind collectively, listen to how your body is responding. If you're not being treated well, then look at it at face value and make a decision based on that. Don't make it based on how it was in the past. Normally, I would say the past is the best predictor of what the future will look like. But in this case, I want you to look at the recent past. How has he or she been treating you in the recent past? Distant, like you said, and disconnected. So that's the best indicator of how you're going to continue to be treated. And I would make difficult, it's not easy, I know, but it's maybe time for you to make a difficult decision about where the relationship is going. Look at what's reality. That's what's so important for us, to not look at the love bombing stage as the barometer for how to determine the validity of the relationship. Look at what is actually happening and make your decision based on that. Otherwise, if you can't do that, then you are likely trauma bonded to this person. And I encourage you to watch our trauma bonding workshop. But you might need some help with a therapist to detach yourself because it might be really hard for you to end the relationship. But I wouldn't encourage you to stay in a relationship where you feel there's a disconnect. We all want to grow closer. With a healthy partner, you'll continually grow closer. Your emotional intimacy will improve. It will feel more and more safe, more emotionally connected. That's what a healthy relationship will look and feel like. A disconnect is just an indicator of you being minimized, undermined, dismissed, devalued, and all the things that will just cause you so much pain in the future. I hope that makes sense.
Yes. And Annette, we have received comments from the answers that you've provided to some of these questions, and they really appreciate what you said and really related with what you said and said thank you. So I want to make sure that you know.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
Yeah, and I think we're okay to go ahead and move forward.
Okay. So after all of the lavish attention and affection, a love bomber will begin to reveal who they really are. They will show their aggression and use harmful words and behaviors. And maybe it's not aggression. It could just be that they're kind of flatlined and they're not really interested in you the way they were. Or they will say things to devalue you and to bring you down. These two different stages of the trauma bond cycle can commonly go back and forth. And in a later stage, after the devaluing stage, the love bomber will use what I mentioned earlier, hoovering, to lure the victim back in if they feel like they're going to leave. They don't want to let you get away. So then they'll pour the love bombing back on, but it's just a tactic. It is not their consistent behavior. So it's not authentic. If it's not consistent, then you can know that you're being manipulative. That you're being manipulated. Hoovering forces the victim to engage with the one causing harm by basically any means. Hoovering can look like love bombing all over again, clinginess, making promises to change their behavior, asking friends and family for information about the victim, talking through friends or family to get to the victim. And if that doesn't work, it can be pretending an illness, or they need your help, or threatening to show up if you don't answer their calls, stalking, threatening suicide. or it can look like sabotaging the other person. Also, they at least get that engagement through any form of connection, even if it's a hostile connection. Hoovering is emotional abuse. And if it's happening, it's so important for you to avoid contact and block them wherever possible. And it's maybe very tempting to be hoovered back. This is where you really need to use your thinking and listen to your gut. And don't just follow your heart. Don't follow what feels good. I want you to guard your heart. I want you to look at yourself as you are your best advocate. And you need to step into that role and to be extra cautious at this time. Your safety is important. Your emotional safety is important. And so I want you to be thinking about that. And if you are stalked or if you're being harassed, think about contacting law enforcement, because that's a time when narcissists can become actually physically violent and dangerous. So really pay attention to those signs. Don't gaslight yourself and say, oh, it's not so bad. Oh, he's just, upset right now, or she's just upset right now. No, a healthy person doesn't act that way. This is a sign of emotional immaturity and unhealthiness, an inability to cope, a lack of coping mechanisms. So they act out in ways that can be really scary and harmful. So with all the signs mentioned, it's key to listen to your gut if something makes you feel uncomfortable and doesn't just feel right. It's so important. But sometimes after being love bombed, we actually lose touch with our gut. We have ignored our gut early on in the relationship, and so it's hard to find it again. So it's really important to take a deep breath and to really think rationally, and maybe even have friends talk to you about what's happening and what they're observing in the relationship. It's okay to pause and slow down and consider your relationship. Listen to yourself, check internally if you're allowing emotions to drive your thoughts, or if you're allowing your values and your common sense and what you've learned to drive your thoughts. And it can be difficult to embark on the exercise of questioning your circumstances when the relationship feels so good. So know this and be cautious about not letting your emotions drive your decisions. If you like and enjoy their excessive compliments, their oversharing, their need for constant connection and communication, or their grandiose affection, their gifts, and so on, I would caution you to consider putting a pause on dating and continuing to work on yourself and your healing. Because I think a deeper understanding of yourself and your upbringing, as well as developing a strong sense of self-love, is important when dating, and ensuring, that you're mature and you're objective in your thinking patterns. So you may need to take a pause and say, I'm not quite there yet. I need to do some more internal work before I'm really ready to date someone and to have a discerning mind. You want to be fully capable of discerning. You want to reach emotional maturity within yourself. Everybody, thinks they can do that process of growing while they're dating, but it just sets you up. It increases the risk that you're going to choose the wrong person for you that can really bring a lot of pain into your life. So it's important to do that work and take a pause. You don't need to be dating if you feel like you have some work that you need to do on yourself. And once you've completed that work, you're going to be so much more attractive to a healthy person. They're going to be so much more attracted to you. You're going to draw those other healthy people into your life. I do want to make something clear. Love bombing can happen to anyone. And there's no shame for anyone who's experienced this manipulative tactic. There can be overt forms of love bombing, like I mentioned, and more subtle forms. And sometimes there's no red flags. You miss it altogether because it's so subtle and so clever. So don't blame yourself. It's very common that people miss it in the beginning. And so I'm not saying to work on yourself before dating to be hard on you. I just want you to bring your best, most emotionally mature self to the table when you're choosing who you want to spend your time with. So some of the things that I've mentioned might make someone feel more prone to experience love bombing and accept it without seeing it as a warning sign. What are those things? Okay. Growing up in a home where a parent was emotionally detached or emotionally unavailable, leaving the child to yearn for a safe emotional connection, for safe love and attention in a way that they couldn't get it then, but now maybe they can get it in this relationship. So it's a vulnerability that you would bring to the relationship if you haven't done the work on your childhood stuff. Another thing that can make someone prone to being love bombed is where love was expressed in giving gifts while growing up. And then when gifts are being used to lure you in a relationship, you may mistake it for love because that was what was modeled for you in your parent-child relationship. Having been raised in an abusive family dynamic can also cause you to be more attracted to a person who may love bomb you, or be love bombed and either not recognizing what's happening or ignoring it if it is, because it just feels so good that the endorphins are so pleasurable that if you've experienced abuse growing up, you are more susceptible. So you need to be extra cautious about thinking rationally and really having a check and balances for yourself. Many love bombers are narcissists. They have narcissistic tendencies or have diagnosed or undiagnosed narcissistic personality disorder. Love bombers may use some or all of the things that I mentioned when I shared various signs of love bombing, because it's used to keep your attention and affection and to manipulate and control you to stay with them or commit to them. And as I mentioned earlier, they may or may not know what they're doing. It may be conscious and they know exactly what they're doing, or it may be unintentionally motivated by their insecurity. But that insecurity is also not going to be pleasant to deal with, because they're going to rely too much on you to be validating them. They're too needy. It's like they have an empty bucket in front of them and you constantly have to fill it. So you want somebody who's secure, who had a healthy childhood with a secure attachment. So they're bringing that kind of emotional safety to you in the relationship. Okay, so we've shared a lot of information so far, and now I'd like to take some time to offer tips on how one can avoid being seduced and groomed by love bombing and how to recognize it as a warning sign. So first, know if it feels like a fairy tale, it's time to pause and check in with yourself and to give an honest assessment of the relationship. Or as the saying goes, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. And one of the most important things to avoid being love bombed is to know yourself well, know your weaknesses and where you're vulnerable. As much as you know your strengths, it's so important to know your vulnerabilities and listen to your gut. And if you doubt your gut, you really need to ponder why you're doubting yourself. Are you gaslighting yourself? Are you trying to sweep something under the rug because you don't want to face it? Really ask yourself some difficult questions. Or if you know that your vulnerability to affection, you may need to work hard at ignoring your feelings of infatuation. So if you know you're vulnerable to receiving affection, you need to be really stern with yourself about staving off feelings of infatuation. Your instincts are usually good until you have significant healing to do regarding a recent relationship or a relationship with primary caregivers. So your instincts can serve you well, but if you're recently out of a relationship or you've never worked on, like I've said numerous times, your primary relationship with your primary caregivers, then you're going to be more vulnerable. Their words and actions the love bombers' words and actions, if you watch them over time, are going to be inconsistent. They're going to be incongruent, and you're going to notice that something feels off. They're not acting the way they were in the beginning. Even if it's a slight feeling, I want you to pay attention to it, because it's so common that we ignore the signs in our body. We tell ourselves, oh, I'm being too critical. Oh, I'm being too sensitive. Oh, I'm being too needy. Oh, we blame ourselves. It's very, very common to blame oneself rather than to blame the tangible evidence that you're seeing. Work on yourself continually, establishing a strong sense of self and a deep, healthy self-love, the kind of self-love that doesn't drive you to look for outside sources of reassurance, acceptance, and affirmation. You need to know who you are and to feel secure in that. Of course, we all need community, and we need to be around friends who love us and so forth. But really check in with yourself. If you're seeking those types of reassurances, are you over functioning? Are you saying yes to a lot of things because you don't want people to, you want to be Mr. or Miss Perfect, and you don't want to let somebody down? Those are signs that you're really not loving yourself well, and that you're seeking outside attention. So look for ways that you may be ignoring the true needs that you have for yourself. Know your yeses and nos. Set boundaries and honor your boundaries by implementing consequences if your dating partner does not comply. A boundary without a consequence is nothing more than a complaint. It means nothing. It's just you nagging. So if you say, I don't want you to call me after 9 o'clock at night, and they keep doing it, don't take their calls, and maybe don't talk to them the next day, or say, if you do that, I'm not going to talk to you the next day. I just need my space. I need to rest. I need to go to sleep. Whatever your boundary is, it can be over anything. We're allowed to have our own preferences about the way we want to live our life. And so you can just politely set a boundary, but if they don't honor it, then it's so important that you employ consequences and give yourself that power to take back your life the way you want it. If you know that someone is a narcissist, stay clear of them. And if you aren't sure, stay balanced in reality. If something is a flag to you, or if something is questionable, write it down. It can be so helpful to write things down, because we tend to forget the bad, and we just want to remember the good. So it's so important to have a journal where you can check back and say, oh my gosh, I wrote this down last week and now it's happening again, so that you can really stay in tune. Be sure not to skip over signs just because they did something nice. That could very well be a sign of love bombing. Just pay attention to those niceties while also checking in with your gut instinct. Keep a realistic mindset. Nobody's perfect. There's going to be flags, but are these red flags or are these yellow flags? Are there things like he gets angry easily, or he's super disorganized at home? Write it down. And if you need to, review the flags with a trusted friend or a trusted family member or a skilled therapist to help you be sure. And finally, consider writing down what a healthy relationship looks and feels like. Do some research and digging for yourself. It's so worth your time. A few signs of a healthy relationship include mutual listening, mutual empathy, true consideration for the other person's well-being and their preferences and their dislikes. A healthy relationship will show compassion. It will show kindness. It won't be short and stern, abrupt. It will be kind. There will be care. And very importantly, really good conflict resolution skills. It's so okay to have conflicts. That's how you work out where you stand in the relationship and how you believe about certain values. But you want somebody in a conflict to still treat you with respect, to have a mindset that they really want to hear you, that they want to be curious about why something's upsetting to you. They don't want to block you and shut you down and be defensive, be so aware of defensiveness. You don't want that. You want someone who is willing to just be relaxed and say, well, let's talk about that. I'm really curious why that bothers you. And then being willing to say, I understand why that does, and I won't do that anymore. Or, well, can we reach a compromise? And somebody is willing to discuss a way so that both people feel like they won the argument. There doesn't have to be a winner and a loser, but narcissists always want to win arguments. That's a whole other conversation, which we have in another workshop, but you want to definitely see that their conflict resolution skills are healthy and comfortable. Genuine love moves slowly and consistently, and it doesn't have the intensity that we've talked about today. A healthy infatuation is okay to have, where you feel amazing and embrace all the excitement. And you may even imagine your life with them down the road, and those thoughts make you happy. That's okay. But you may even think about all your interactions with them. You may ruminate over your interactions. And there's something chemical that happens in the brain with hormones. And I want to be sure to acknowledge that that is healthy. However, there's a fine line between that healthy infatuation and unhealthy obsession, where reality is out the window, or maybe fear is involved, or maybe a hope of being saved from your life or your life circumstances is motivating you to be in this relationship. In a healthy infatuation, you don't need rescuing. You can stay in reality. You can keep boundaries in place and be respected and loved, and you can have clarity about your emotions and enjoy your autonomy and independence. You don't become swept up in this person's life where you then drop your friends and family members. You are able to keep a balance. Your autonomy is so important. For anyone listening who's unsure if love bombing is happening, a good test to know is to bring up your boundaries or share something that made you uncomfortable. See how they respond. Bring up a boundary. I don't like it when you do this. Please don't do this. Whatever it is that you're talking about, or share something that they did or said that made you uncomfortable. See how they respond. How do they navigate conflict? For example, you may be a person who likes to spend time with your family, and the love bomber may be commanding all of your extra time and attention, and you don't have the time with your family that you'd like to spend. Try telling them you'd like to do more with your family by yourself, without your dating partner present, and see what they say. Or if you need more personal space, tell them. And if they stay connected to you and respond with respect and kindness and don't punish you, don't retaliate for it, then you can know they're not love bombing. Because a love bomber, where you hold a boundary and ask for distance, they're going to probably do one of the ploys that I mentioned, the pouting or the retaliation, the anger, saying they can't live without you, tracking you, all of that. It can take many faces, but just be aware of that. A healthy person will say, oh my gosh, I totally understand. Go for it. Spend your time, and I'll go do whatever else that, they want to do. But if they push or argue back or guilt you or have a combative stance, then that is a huge, huge, huge red flag. And if they continue to challenge or disrespect your boundaries, that's another red flag. Stating your boundaries is a great test to know whether you're dealing with a love bomber. And upholding your boundaries is a sure way that you can protect yourself from getting into a trauma bond. Don't ignore your boundaries. Hold them. You're holding onto yourself. You, like I said, are your best advocate. And You want to set the boundaries for life. Like it's up to you where you build your fence. And you don't want to let other dogs hop over your fence and poop in your yard. You need to protect yourself. So don't be afraid of setting boundaries. And if you are uncomfortable with setting boundaries, there's a lot of books out there about boundaries that I would encourage you to spend some time learning about them. Another thing is often outsiders can see something isn't right. So you may want to check in, like I said. Some other people will notice signs, they're objective, where you are not objective because you're emotionally infatuated. So I'm not saying to make this big public question to a whole group of friends, but you might want to ask a few people what they think about your relationship or what they think about this person. And you may also try refusing something that the love bomber says or does, or give a test, for example, because it's good to test. If they tell you they love you and you tell them you've been thinking about that and you're feeling like it may be a little too soon to be telling each other that, say so. See how they respond. If they respond respectfully, then you're probably okay. If they get defensive or if they retaliate, then it's not a safe person. You can communicate it with care and kindness. I'm not saying to be rude, and assurance of your interest in them. Like you can say, I'm interested in you. I just think it's too soon. But their response is data for you to collect. Or if they give you an extravagant gift, thank them, but let them know it feels too soon for that, and ask them to save it away until the relationship grows more. You can tell them that it means a lot and you appreciate their kind gesture, but try telling them it makes you uncomfortable and ask them to wait to give it to you later and see their response. This shows that you are not going to be manipulated by gifts. That's good data for them to have. And it also shows that, you're patient, but you appreciate the gift. It's just too early. So there's a lot of data you can collect by making a statement like that. And when there are the inevitable disappointments and disagreements or fights that come up in a relationship, you're going to gather important information about how they respond. And if the response makes you uncomfortable and uneasy, you can know something isn't right, and keep paying attention to that as a red flag. Don't ignore your gut. Be thankful that you saw it as early as you did, even if you're 4 or 5 months in the relationship or longer. Take the data and listen to it. Don't ignore it. It's a gift when you can finally see what's happening. So you need to be strong and be able to exit a relationship that might have felt really good in the beginning. But that's your job, to take care of yourself. No one else is going to do that for you. Okay, if you do these things and you determine love bombing is taking place, it's time to reconsider staying in a relationship with this person or leaving. It can be hard. And like I just said, to end a relationship after being love bombed. Let's be real. It felt so good in the beginning. And, nobody wants to let that go. Your self-esteem and self-worth may be in decline, and you may not feel clear or strong or sure enough to leave. Like if they love bombed you and now they're acting distant, you can feel really insecure and unstable. And it can be really hard for a bit. So lean on other people who love you and who have always been there for you. If you have community, it's so important, because connections with safe people are what you need to get through a breakup. It's absolutely essential. Some people feel intoxicated by love bombing and are in the cycle of trauma bonding where it's very difficult to get out. I want to assure you that it's the best thing for the health and happiness of your life and future to terminate the relationship where love bombing is taking place and where trauma bonds have already formed. It safeguards your mental health and emotions, and often your physical safety, to walk away. It may be difficult, but it'll be much harder the longer you stay, and things are not going to unfold well. So if you see them early in the relationship, I can assure you that those negative things are going to escalate over time, and it's going to be even harder because they will have there will be a cycle of abuse where there's a honeymoon stage and hooks you back in, or they hoover you. And all of those layers of the cycle of love bombing are going to make it harder to leave. So as soon as you recognize it for what it is, make an exit. Seeing a therapist who's trained and skilled in working with abuse and trauma victims can be a really big help. If it's particularly challenging to leave the relationship, especially, it's really good to have someone that you can talk about things that you might not necessarily talk to even a very close friend about. Or if you're feeling scared or that there's danger, it's really important to talk to a skilled therapist or even a domestic violence advocate from a DV agency. They're skilled in abuse and trauma, and they aren't going to judge you for having this trauma bond. They're going to help you. Most likely your dating partner is not going to change their behavior. And so you'll need to have support from people who can help you end the relationship safely. So I want to be sure to tell you that if you're feeling unsafe, not just emotionally, but physically, you can reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline for help. Their phone number is 1-800-799-SAFE or 799-7233. They have so many resources that they can provide for you, whether it's legal advocacy or a therapist through a DV agency, temporary shelter. There's so many resources that they can send you towards. The bottom line is a healthy relationship feels good. Consistently and slowly over time, it builds in strength. There's mutual listening, mutual respect, mutual validation, and autonomy. Bonds can form with boundaries in place. And loving yourself well and taking good care of yourself feels really good. It feels so emotionally safe, unlike the chaotic feeling with a love bomber. So I'm going to stop here for today. And if there's any remaining questions, I'm happy to answer them. Even if we've already gone over, but I'm happy to stay over. And for those of you who had to leave, I totally understand because we're over time now. But okay, thank you for being here. Jill, are there any questions?
Yes. And I want to say a couple of quick things because we've had questions regarding the recording. The recording will be emailed to you. And we also had some questions about the trauma bonding workshop. I dropped that link in the chat twice. If you were not able to get it, please email us at info@themendproject.com. And you can email us for anything and everything if you want to share a comment, an experience, your story, ask questions. So feel free to reach out to us at any time. Now for the questions. Somebody asked if there is a self-help workbook on how to detach from a love bomber.
Oh, that is a really good question. I haven't read this workbook, but Natalie Hoffman wrote a book called Is It Me Making Sense of My Confusing Relationship or something like that? Is it me making sense of my... I think that's the title. And she has a companion workbook. And she also has a support group. And the support group is called Flying Free. And I know that one of her key focuses in that support group is detaching. So it's only $29 a month. You have lots of resources. You have a community of like-minded people. You can post your comments daily. Natalie responds. There's a once a week coaching call that you can listen in or participate. So I know that is a key focus of her work. So I would start there.
Very good. Thank you, Annette.
Yeah.
And said, thank you so much. I always glean a lot from your programs, and it's reassuring to know that others have had the same confusions and questions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we understand that. And that's why we do this, because every
Yes.
year can glean something from this time. Okay.
And it's good to know we're not alone. It's such a pervasive problem, um, narcissistic abuse or covert emotional abuse. And there's a whole community, there's millions of people out there who've been through it. And so we just love doing these workshops to bring people together and to validate you that no, it's not your fault. And if you miss the signs of love bombing, it's not your fault. It's not everybody has that built-in mechanism to discern that. Unless you learned about it, you might not have any clue that you need to be discerning. So, and even the most intelligent people, running Fortune 500 companies, fall victim to love bombing and narcissistic abuse. So, there's no specific demographic that this targets. It hits everyone.
Yes, I appreciate you shared that, because sometimes we think it looks one way or like a one type of person, but doing the work we do, we see that it affects anybody and everybody from all walks of life. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So another person said that they experienced the trauma bond cycle and the hoovering was terrible. They learned it in therapy, and fortunately, it helped them to get out of the relationship. And learning these signs is so valuable.
I'm so glad that you had a good therapist and that you were able to exit, because hoovering can be really powerful and it's can be very intimidating and scary even at times, um, because it can be so overwhelming. So I'm just so thankful that you got out. Good for you.
Yes. And I see a couple of quick questions. One, yes, the contact info to connect with our team. I placed that in the chat as well. You can pull it from there, or you can email us at info@themendproject.com. Also, Annette, somebody is asking, is there a link to the resource that you just mentioned? Natalie Hoffman's.
No, we don't have. Let me just Google this really fast. One second. Is it me making sense of your confusing marriage? But you can apply it to a dating situation as well. And it's available on Amazon. And then let me look up, let's see. You can Google the Flying Free Sisterhood program. Or you can just Google flyingfreenow.com to get to the main website, where all the resources and links are located. Flyingfreenow.com.
Helpful. Thank you, Annette.
Sure.
Okay, let me see, make sure I don't miss anything here. Does infatuation make people lash out sometimes? Is this possible? And this person says, I also felt I would get incongruent too. I wish I could talk to someone about this whole experience. To be honest, it was really confusing for me. Some mentioned getting on medication, that medication would help with detachment. Do you want to say?
Okay. Please give me a little more context. I don't know if you're talking about you displaying those characteristics or the other person. Jill,
Yeah.
can you read that again?
Yeah. So infatuation. So does infatuation make people lash out sometimes is the question.
Meaning that you're lashing out at the person because you're infatuated, or that the infatuated partner is lashing out at you?
They just clarified, and it says, I would say I did display it, and so did he.
Well, I think that infatuation just means that your emotions are more heightened. But no, I wouldn't say that it causes you to lash out. That's more, lashing out is more of a, that you're dysregulated, that something they did was really triggering, because you had these high expectations from your infatuation. So then when they do something that counters that, it can be triggering, and then you may lash out, but that's really more of a coping skill that you need to develop in yourself to be able to regulate yourselves and respond versus react. It's so important, but it's very common that when you're trauma triggered, that you're going to react rather than respond. But it's so important for your own well-being and for how you show up to relationships that you work with a therapist on coping mechanisms when you feel triggered, so that you aren't reacting. But it's very common.
Really good, Annette. Okay, this looks like a comment. I don't see a question, but I'm going to read it to you. It says, family members say I'm a goody two shoes and I'm spoiled, but what I've figured out is my family members are mostly religious and have narcissistic traits and misinterpret Bible scripture taken out of context. I've had one family member who told me I live in a fantasy world because what I value in a marriage most in my spouse. I thank you for this group and all you do to validate and teach us healthy relationships and healthy self. Thank you. By the way, I feel I am coming out of brainwashing in all caps. So thank you for all you do, Mend.
Thank you for saying that. Unfortunately, faith-based groups, whether it's a family group or a friend group, they can all get caught up in a certain rhetorical interpretation of scripture. And it's more like it's a culture where they all believe certain things that are misconstrued. And if you go against that, then you're going to experience pushback, because now you're threatening the way their worldview, the way they think the world should operate. So it's really smart of you to see this for what it is. And it's perfectly okay for you to create a little distance and respect the values that you have for your family. You don't have to be swept up into that. It sounds like you're deconstructing your faith a little, and you aren't aligning with that traditional culture that you grew up in, and that's perfectly fine. So I've been injured in my journey from judgmental Christians, and so many people have. But it can happen in any faith where there's a tight community that believes a certain way. So it's harmful and it's hurtful, but it's not uncommon.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, a question. My husband is an emotionally abusive narcissist, and we have many children together. I also believe in honoring my marriage as a union by God. Do you want to speak to that, Annette? Are there helps? Are there tools? Are there therapists who can, how can we help speak to that?
I so encourage you to join Natalie Hoffman's Flying Free program, where it's all Christian women, and it's helping through this narcissistic experience. I feel I don't want to say too much, but you know, believing that God wants you to stay committed, like placing the institution of marriage above the well-being of yourself and the children inside that marriage because you're with a narcissist is very common for certain religious cultures to do. But I just want to caution you. In the Bible, Jesus was always promoting freedom for the oppressed. And you have to think about how having a narcissist as a parent for your kids can really negatively impact them, even if you are overcompensating and being an amazing person. But they're also seeing you as an enabler. And it's likely to really affect them when they're older. And there's plenty of, in fact, Jill, help me out with this. The coercive control, it's Chris, what is?
Yeah, Dr. Cochlea or
Dr. Cochlea, yeah. There's a resource that I want to provide for you. But I really encourage you to join Flying Free at $29 a month because it will help you gain perspective. And no one's going to pressure you to leave or pressure you to stay. It's just going to give you a lot of valuable information that I think would be very beneficial to you. And I say that from the bottom of my heart because I know how important it is to honor God. But I think it's important to hear other perspectives that are Christian and be willing to self-examine your worldview and see if maybe it might not always be completely accurate the way you're viewing it. Maybe it just needs a slight adjustment or whatever, but it's just so healthy to be willing to consider other people's wisdom and to check our worldview, our beliefs, because we all carry biases. You know, we're a product of the culture we grew up in. And so that doesn't mean that other people's viewpoints are always wrong. There's a lot of knowledge out there that we can glean to help us make really good decisions.
Yes. And for any parents who want to know the resource that Annette just mentioned, it's coercivecontrolconsulting.com. And so I want to make sure that you have that information as well. This group is awesome. They're looking for, I landed also the link in the chat, Annette, for the flyingfreenow.com because all these resources are really helpful and we have multiple people asking for them. So, and that was a great recollection. Okay, so I have one more. I think there's one more here. I'm saying there's one more, and if it's not yours and I missed you, please email us at info@themendproject.com. Okay, so this says, unfortunately, this is my parents' story. My parents are super Catholic and have been together over 50 years. And my dad is the enabling codependent. I believe this disastrously affected my sisters and mine's relationships as adults. I've spent the last decade working on reversing this.
Such a good point. I'm so glad thank you for being vulnerable to share that. A narcissistic parent in the house and an enabling parent in the house has very detrimental effects on kids. And that's why when there's domestic violence in a house, physical violence, and even if it's not very often or not very physical, like maybe it's a punch in the wall or, you know, a slap on the arm or something and not really dangerous. But social services wants that child removed from the household. So if the victim is not willing to separate from the abuser, they will remove the children. And when you think about that, it's because some, statistics show the harmful effect, not just seeing violence, but the tension and the manipulation and the control in the dynamics is really it bleeds over into the kids in so many ways, too much for me to talk about today. But when you consider that emotional abuse or narcissistic abuse is really the common thread in all relational abuse cases, even those of physical violence, that is the predominant problem. It's the emotional abuse. So even if there's not physical violence, emotional abuse is very damaging for children. And so I'm so thankful that you shared that with us so that other people who have kids in these relationships can understand that it takes years of therapy to overcome the harm. I mean, and so thank you. I'm glad you're doing the work or did the work. And just thank you for sharing that with us.
Yes, and that is it for today, Annette.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you for being here. I so appreciate that you come each month. And if it's your first time, come again and go to our website and check out our resources. But most of all, take really good care of yourself. Until next time, bye-bye.